Internet is that massive computer network, the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big? How does one know? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what Internet is?
It's time for Fully Threaded Radio.
It is Fully Threaded Radio, voice of the FCH Sourcing Network. This is Eric Dudas, and I'm joined today by the code-slinging co-host of Fully Threaded. He's lifetime honorary Texan, Mr. Brian Musker. Brian, how are you today?
I'm good. I've been told, incidentally, that my deep Texan accent's sort of slipping a bit, and I need to go back for a brush-up.
Yes, I heard you just got your tickets.
Yeah, that's brush-up on a different language.
Well, we'll get into that in a little while. If you buy, sell, distribute, or import fasteners, this is the Internet Talk Radio show for you. Thanks for joining us, everybody. This is episode number 20, and it will be uploaded to the Fully Threaded site on February 24th, 2011. On today's show, we've got an impressive lineup. We'll talk with BB&T Capital Markets industry analyst Holden Lewis, and he'll run down the latest trends for us and present his view of what we're seeing in the market these days. Then Tom Buddenbohn will be joining us. He's a partner in Technology Component Southwest and the membership chairman for the NFDA. He'll be speaking with us from the floor of the Fastener Fair 2011 in Stuttgart, Germany. Next, we'll speak with Rob Lucas of Fidelis Fasteners and get his comments on the story coming out of Heads and Threads, and that's the story of the day, actually. If you haven't heard much about that yet, you've come to the right place. And before all that, Mike McNulty of Fastener Technology International magazine will kick things off with the latest edition of his Fastener News Report. What do you think of that lineup, Bri?
Yeah, that's pretty impressive, actually. I'll be interested to hear from Tom, and Rob will give us some pretty good input, I think, on his take on the Heads and Threads things.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You've been a busy guy lately. You weren't available for any of the recording sessions this time. What have you been up to that took you away so much?
Well, I'll get back to some of that in a bit later, but in general, we're putting some changes into the scrubber, and means I really got to check everything going through really, really carefully. We're getting a fair number of uploads. And I should say that if you are a FCH member and you want to really get great activity on your parts, you should reload your inventory every few months. It's the best way of making sure that your inventory shows to as many people as possible, because Google and Bing love to see slightly changed content.
That is excellent advice. So get out there and get your inventory all scrubbed up, folks.
Right, yeah.
Hey, folks, email us at the address ftr@fullythreaded.com. Let us know how we're doing. We'd be glad to hear from you. And also, keep your eyes peeled if you're a Twitter user for our occasional posts under the handle Fully Threaded. We're social networking fools these days, and taking more advantage of Facebook as well. We added the Facebook widget to the fullythreaded.com webpage, and we've got a little memento already from Stuttgart up there. What's that, right. Tom Buddenbohn's new car?
Yeah, right. I hope Tom spent as much time looking at some of the new Porsches and floating around Stuttgart as he did at the Fasteners, at the Fastener Expo there.
Right. We're going to be talking to him a little bit later in the show, as I said, and in the recording he pointed out that they've had some cars on the floor there, and lo and behold, Mark Lennart, the executive vice president of NFDA, shot that over. So, hey man, it's real-time social networking happening right here on FTR.
Right.
What kind of car is that? I know it's a Porsche, but it looks like it's all dialed up for the racetrack.
Yeah, it's one of the racing ones. I mean, where else would you have Porsches but the home of Porsche, which is Stuttgart?
Oh, is that right? I didn't realize. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Well, a fella emailed me after the last episode pointing out that he wasn't able to write to our Facebook wall, and we tried to set it up so that anybody could write messages out there, either on the discussion page or on the actual wall. And now that we're trying to put more content up there, I hope somebody will go out there and write something and let me know if they can do it. I have a confession to make. Up until very recently, I was just not a Facebook user. Just never had a need for it. I always had a page, but I never had anything up there. I think my total life experience in Facebook was like 8 hours until very recently, and it's not that complicated, but I think you should be able to write up there, folks. So,
well, we've set it up so you can. I mean, Facebook's gone through a couple of changes over the last few weeks, but as an admin, it's sort of got a bit more awkward to manage your own pages. I mean, they thought they were making it easier, but they have not succeeded. And so it's also possible that some of the things are not working right that they've put in place. So if you find that, let us know, because it's our intention that you can make comments. In fact, we'd like you to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, by the way, for the emails, folks, and by and large, they've been positive. We do appreciate it, and the things that you don't like, we really need to hear that stuff, too. So keep sending your feedback to us, and I hope that, as I just mentioned, you'll use the Facebook site to communicate with us, too. That's a different type of communication because it's public, and thus the social aspect of it. I guess really all Facebook users are probably snickering at me right now.
Yeah, what have you proved that you're not part of the under-19 generation who know more about Facebook than how to speak English?
Well, I can link up a storm, man. I can do that with the best of them. There's other things I'm really proficient at, but, I just never really had much need for Facebook until recently, so.
Right.
And speaking of the emails, we've had several comments from our various correspondents in the fastener world of listeners from all over the place after hearing our guests on the show. So we should send out a special welcome, I guess, to all the fully threaded listeners that we've got in Europe, India, China, and South America, as well as, I guess, down in your part of the world, Bri, south of Texas.
A fair way south of Texas.
Right.
We have a few people in Singapore and some New Zealanders and Australians too.
Well, if any of you folks are listening at this point, we sure do appreciate you being with us. And we want to hear from you too. So it's pretty easy to get in touch with us, and we just outlined that, so we hope to hear from you.
All right.
Let's take a moment to mention that aside from being the hosts of this fine Internet Fastener Talk radio show, we're also the people behind the FCH Sourcing Network, and we hope you'll take advantage of the network anytime the need arises. If you're searching and sourcing or looking to generate extra sales, our mission is to support you in that. There are well over 500,000 line items, and thousands of different companies use us each week at this point as a sourcing tool. So, log on at www.fastenersclearinghouse.com, and all our contact info is out there too, so you can get with us that way. We'll be glad to speak with you directly if we can fill you in further or if we can help you out somehow.
Right, and that's Fasteners with an S, okay?
The S is for safety.
You're right.
Is that what it's for?
No, apparently.
Well, we're always working and smoothing out the network and trying to improve it. And Brian, what have you been working on since the latest episode that is making things just a little bit better for our users?
Actually, a couple of things. One of them relates to the Source Finder, and in case you can't remember exactly, the Source Finder is the means by which people send RFQs to FCH members. So if you're doing a search, can't find something, you click a button and it sends a Source Finder to our members, asking if they have the item, could they quote on it. We're doing a bit of work to make the emails that come back to the members a little more smartphone friendly, okay? this should make it easier, and it will lead into a number of other changes that will make the whole method of replying also smartphone friendly. We know from experience that many of our members actually get these to their smartphones. Eric, you and I were sitting at dinner once with one of our members when they showed us the email that had come into their phone.
That's right.
So we've got that. We're also continuing our work on the scrubber, and it relates mainly to improving the sizes and is zeroing in still on getting it right for washers, okay? And then we're going to change the interface for searching, okay? One of the big changes coming through the system in the next few weeks.
Well, that all sounds like good work, Bri. And keep on scrubbing. And folks, like we said earlier in the show, reload that inventory as often as you can, because it really does help you maximize your investment in FCH, and it helps keep that network pumping along. You know, I was helping a guy out with his inventory today, and he mentioned to me that he was looking at the Drudge Report, and he was thinking to himself, can you believe the headlines? Did you ever in your life think that you would look at the headlines, the front page, and see what is out there currently? And, you know, it's true. I took a minute to toggle out and just shell out of my work for a minute, and I was looking at the site, and, you know, the Mideast is ablaze. Fuel prices are soaring. The NEA is holding this pout in Madison. And, you know, on top of all this, of course, we got this big news with heads and threads, which we're going to be discussing here in the show. And the times we live in, what can you say, Bri?
Right. You're right. Well, I mean, the fuel prices to a degree will impact the prices of fasteners, because there is a component of fuel in the production and shipment of them.
Well, that's absolutely true. And as we'll hear from Holden Lewis later, we're in a little bit of an inflationary cycle right now, and price pressures are definitely out there.
So I was going to say maybe that also explains the pretty good activity on Fasteners Clearinghouse. I mean, we've all seen it, really quite a surge in searches and drill downs.
Yeah, that's true. It's been really a fantastic February for us so far, and whatever's going on out there, people are really searching for inventory. I mean, that's the FCH perspective on it. That's really our snapshot into the industry, and the last several weeks have been gangbusters. So take that for what you will, folks. And we're going to hear from some news and analyst people during the show today. I guess it's a little bit of a somber show, actually. You know, we don't have a lot of lighthearted stuff to cover with you, but actually here, before we get to the Fastener News Report, I can always count on Mike McNulty to keep me advised of the latest developments in the fastener world, and I just received an email from him here. You might have seen that the president is out grabbing some headlines currently, and he's on a jobs PR tour at the moment. And Mike says in this email, "Too bad I didn't get this in time for recording my segment. I just realized that the abbreviation for Obama's Winning the Future tour is WTF."
Yeah, very appropriate for the people who use text messaging. It's about right, too.
So there's a laugh for you, folks.
Thanks, Mike.
And with that, why don't we get to it? And here is Mike McNulty with the Fastener News Report.
Thanks, Eric, and greetings to all the fully threaded radio listeners out there. This is Mike McNulty with the Fastener News Report, brought to you by Fastener Technology International, the print and digital magazine for the entire global fastener industry. Well, Eric, we broke into balmy spring temperatures last week, but winter has quickly slapped us with a new snowstorm to remind us of two things. One, it's still February in Ohio, and two, Al Gore does not control weather patterns. In other local news, President Obama and his economic dream team are visiting the Buckeye State today to spread some of their job creation wisdom and magic in a small business forum called Winning the Future, which surprisingly features a session on clean energy. Since I wasn't invited, I will stay focused on the fastener industry. Our lead story today is all about the drama unfolding around Heads and Threads International. The fastener industry is buzzing with speculation, rumors, and opinions on the financial condition of Heads and Threads International, also known as HTI. GlobalFastenerNews.com reported last week that the company had gone into receivership with $16 million in debt and that it might close in April if a buyer was not found. There are no official or local news reports to confirm any of this, and so far no one involved with HTI will go on record with a response. Founded in 1953 as Heads and Threads Company in Chicago, HTI is owned by Capital Partners, a private equity investment firm in Connecticut that invests in and supports small and mid-sized companies. Since it began in 1982, Capital Partners has acquired more than 60 companies. In addition to HTI, Capital lists 9 portfolio companies, including Dayton Parts, Lone Star Beef, and Harbor Linens. HTI gets its fasteners from over 100 factories located in China, Thailand, Taiwan, Vietnam, and other locations. Each year it imports 6,000 containers of about 9 billion fasteners. The company catalog offers 122 product lines, and it stocks over 15,000 fastener products. HTI has 5 market-aligned distribution points in Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, Los Angeles, and Sayreville, New Jersey. Despite our investigative efforts, we have no independent verification that HTI has entered into receivership or that it might be closed in April, as alleged by GlobalFastenerNews.com. But a loss of a firm of this size would be a blow to many people and companies in the fastener industry. On the other hand, it would present opportunities for HTI competitors and potential new ventures. We'll keep you updated on this story. Now let's move on to the Fastener Newsmaker highlights, which are led this week by expansions. Holochrome has ordered an AFC Holcroft mesh belt heat treating furnace to be used for hardening cap screws and set screws. The new equipment is part of Holochrome's expansion of its new manufacturing plant in Wallingford, Connecticut. Delivery is scheduled for the second quarter of this year. Automotive fastening solutions supplier A. Raymond Tinnerman says that it is expanding its manufacturing operations in Kentucky. The company plans to add more than 25 jobs and invest about $500,000 at its facility in Flemingsburg, Kentucky. David Neno, president and CEO, says that the company is increasing its customer base outside of the automotive sector by adding solar energy and building industry products. Level 1 Fasteners in West Virginia is planning an expansion that will create 30 new jobs. According to local reports, the fastener manufacturer spent $3.5 million on a new facility, and owner Jack Bordelais says that he will invest about $1.5 to $2 million more on new equipment and office facilities. Level 1 serves the U.S. Navy as well as the aerospace, aircraft, medical, and oil drilling markets. Local news reports say that Latrobe Specialty Steel is looking at sites in the Pittsburgh region to build a titanium processing plant that would employ about 60 people. Latrobe is looking for a site to accommodate a 75 to 100,000 square foot plant to produce titanium that would be rolled into wire to be used for making fasteners for aerospace applications. Total investment will be in the neighborhood of $15 to $30 million. The company expects to pick its site by the end of March. Republic Engineered, another supplier of materials used to make fasteners and other cold-form parts, has announced that its new $20 million precision sizing mill in Kentucky is fully operational. The new production line enables Republic to produce round and hex-shaped bars and coils with closer than standard tolerances. On the personnel side, Elgin Fastener Group has promoted 2 members of its Ohio Rod Products division. Joe Johanningman has been named accounting manager, and Mike Hughes has been named operations manager. Joe is a 6-year veteran of Ohio Rod Products, and he previously served as systems administrator. Mike has served as sales correspondent, sales supervisor, and inside sales manager during his 18 years with Ohio Rod. Annixter International reports that Dennis Lethem will retire as executive vice president and chief financial officer at the end of June 2011. Ted Dosh will replace Dennis in the same position at the beginning of July. On the sales side, a local news service reports that Worth Austria has recorded a turnover of 142 million euros last year, its best outcome since it started doing business in 1962. The company is now looking to hire additional sales reps. Indian news outlets are reporting that Ruia Group has taken over the production and logistics operations of the Acument GmbH & Company in Germany for an undisclosed amount. Chairman Pawan Ruia said that this deal is aimed at tapping into opportunities during the next boom in the Indian automotive market, which he said is projected to grow 5-fold by the year 2020. Our final newsmaker highlight is that the Board of Directors of Chicago Rivet and Machine Company has declared a regular quarterly dividend of 12 cents per share, payable March 18th to shareholders of record at the close of business on March 4th, 2011. Next up is our Fastener Events on the Horizon report featuring news on 3 exhibit-based events. Fastener Fair Stuttgart 2011 took place this week in Germany with 670 exhibitors from 40 countries. With 150 companies, Germany was the largest exhibitor country, and Italy came in second with over 100 exhibitors. Asian countries, as well as Great Britain, the Netherlands, Turkey, France, and Spain, were also well represented. Online registration for Fastener Tech 11 is now available for show visitors, and some good exhibition spots are still available. The all-industry event located in Rosemont, Illinois, the heart of the fastener industry, features an exhibition and several education and networking opportunities, as well as free admission to Surfin 2011, an exhibition that focuses on surface finishing. Visit www.fastenertech.com and click on the Fastener Tech 11 logo for details. Anne-Marie Houtailing, principal of the Houtailing Group, will be among the featured speakers at the National Industrial Fastener and Mill Supply Expo in Las Vegas this October. She will give a presentation called Creating a Culture of Sales and Increasing Revenue in 2011. Okay, let's turn to the back page of the report where I give 2 personal interest stories and some editorial comments. One of my favorite companies in the fastener industry is the Rotor Clip Company, and I'm pleased to report that on April 1st, the Franklin Township Chamber in New Jersey will award Rotor Clip as its Company of the Year. Based in Somerset, New Jersey, one of several towns in Franklin Township, Rotor Clip makes retaining rings, wave springs, and hose clamps for the automotive, appliance, and general OEM markets. About 40 years ago, Robert Slass, the company's founder, decided to make Franklin Township his corporate home. Since then, the company has grown along with the community, and it currently occupies 250,000 square feet of space on 30 acres, and it employs 275 people. Rotor Clip is a good example of a successful American manufacturing company, and the 100% Made in America label is one that it wears proudly, since all of the processes needed to make its products are performed at the Somerset, New Jersey location. Congratulations to Rotor Clip and the people that work there. In another celebration, Atlantic Fasteners reports that it turns 30 this year, marking not only a key anniversary but a new chapter in the company's 30-year transformation from a small local company to a distinguished national supplier. Today, this small venture commands $13 million in yearly sales and has an aerospace division that has been growing despite the recession at an annual compounded rate of 27%. Also, the company has been operating under 100% employee ownership since 2006, a good choice of path to success. And finally, my editorial comments on the protesting unions, which is a little longer than usual, but an important subject. I've been watching these protests against state government proposals to cut back on union benefits, pensions, membership rules, and collective bargaining in an effort to close giant spending and power gaps. I find these rallies comical and disturbing at the same time. I don't have anything against people belonging to unions, and I know current as well as former union members, including my dad and my wife, but I have to ask the question, where does anyone think that the money comes from? It is no mystery that state and federal governments have spent themselves into a sea of red ink from years of authorizing unwise spending increases, service programs, and union contracts. This all needs to be reversed to avoid total failure. It is also common knowledge that the inherent structure and objectives of most unions are less competition, less work, more money, more benefits, and more time off. This is a surefire recipe to kill innovation, performance, and growth. If you work in the private sector, I'm sure that you have experienced reductions in compensation and benefits during difficult economic times, and that increases that you do get are tied to measurable improvements in sales and/or income. If they are not, then your company is on the road to failure, or it is already gone. Raises and enhanced benefits are not entitlements, but things that are earned through application of hard work, innovation, performance improvements, and good strategy. If you don't like what you're doing or how you're getting compensated for it, then you have 2 options. Go to work somewhere else or accept the terms of your job. Refusing to go to work, leaving the state to avoid making a decision, and publicly protesting changes to your compensation would get most of us fired. I understand the passion on both sides of the issue, but I am coming down on the side of the New Jersey, Indiana, Ohio, and Wisconsin governors. We need people that are willing to lead and tell the truth about the simple mathematics of government spending. People working at all levels of government service need to wake up to the fact that we are in a major spending crisis, which is choking off growth on most fronts, including jobs. Everyone else knows this, and someone needs to act now to save the country. After seeing the ridiculous 2011 spending budget that came out of Washington, D.C. earlier this month, it looks like the states will have to lead. This has been Mike McNulty of Fastener Technology International bringing you the Fastener News Report. Visit FastenerTech.com to learn more about the fastener industry and send your news, comments, corrections, or complaints to me at McNulty@FastenerTech.com.
Up next, Holden Lewis, and then Tom Buddenbohn. It's fully threaded.
FastenersClearinghouse.com. Search and source from over 500,000 line items, all just a mouse click away and available at no charge. When the need arises, you won't find a better place to locate hard-to-find fastener inventory. It's where you need to be.
This is Joe Truckee of Cal Fasteners, and Fasteners Clearinghouse works for us.
This is Robert Wanzer, and Fasteners Clearinghouse works for American Imperial.
This is Andy Pell from ScrewCrew.com, and FCH works for the fastener industry.
Join the sourcing network now and show your inventory to a whole new market. Turn slow movers into cash. List up to 10,000 line items. Show them to distributors only or to the world. FastenersClearinghouse.com. It's where you need to be.
This is John Butler with K&L Sales, your source for fastening technologies, and you're listening to Fully Threaded Radio.
Holden Lewis is an industry analyst for BB&T Capital Markets. He focuses on industrial supply and wholesale distribution, and he's joining us now from their headquarters in Richmond, Virginia. Holden, it's been a while. Welcome back to Fully Threaded.
Thanks, as usual. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Well, it's been a while since we've talked to you, and so much has gone on, so much is in the headlines these days. What's happening in the industrial production market?
Because as you say, there's a lot in the headlines nowadays, and not all of it is all that comforting. But I can at least tell you that where the general economic data stands right now, things are pretty much in outstanding shape. And I'll run through a few numbers here. These are all things that you can access when they come out in the weekly that you publish on your website. But again, they're going to paint a very favorable picture. The metric I look at the most is the Purchasing Managers Index. This measures how many people think things are getting better versus getting worse. Anything over 50 suggests that people see things as growing. Anything under 50 goes the other way. The January reading of the PMI was 60.8. That actually is the highest reading that we've seen this cycle. And to give you a sense, we're now 19 months into an expansion in the industrial space. To be getting your highest reading in the PMI 19 months into expansion, frankly, Eric, that's just remarkable. And given that the PMI tends to lead the key industrial production metric by 3 to 5 months, quite frankly, these PMI readings they're just great readings. They continue to point to a relatively robust environment for industrial companies. We've also seen the order data begin to reaccelerate in the last 2 months. And orders, of course, are also somewhat leading. And I think what we're seeing here is we're seeing capital spending beginning to pick up. And why shouldn't it? Utilization of the manufacturing basis was at about 77% in January. That might surprise some people, but 80% is traditionally considered to be full. So, we're at the point now where we're not getting just people producing, but now you're getting capital spending kicking in, and the macro data continues to point to a good 2011. And frankly, that's also translating at the company level. If you look at Fastenal's January results, their revenues were up 19%. Grainger in January was up 10%. MSC Industrial doesn't put out specific numbers, but their tone is clearly positive. I think that their January was also, frankly, quite strong. And these generally strong readings are coming on a backdrop of some pretty tough weather months. So, again, I would just characterize the general economic environment at this point as being stellar. I would expect that tougher comps and things like that, it might feel a bit slower as you go forward the next 6 to 12 months. But I think that generally speaking, your listeners should continue to look for 2011. That should be a pretty good one.
Well, it's always encouraging to hear those statistics. I know sometime when you have your head in the trenches, it gets a little bit unclear. The headline we can't overlook this week describes spiking fuel prices. Where and when do you expect fastener distributors to see the effects of that?
Yeah, and now veering right into the potential negatives out on the landscape. There's relatively few, but I think, Eric, that you're really targeting one of them. But I think it's broader than just fuel prices. Yes, the issues over in North Africa are driving oil prices up, but it's not just oil. It's not just fuel. This is a topical conversation because it's also steel and copper and aluminum and coal. Oil is just the latest one to really spike up, but it's just among a list. We are in an inflationary environment that a lot of these companies and those listening to this broadcast are no doubt aware of. Now, most companies are seeing their raw materials go up at a rate which is much faster than they can make it up on cost savings or on productivity savings. And so the reaction that we're seeing in the market is companies are looking to raise prices. This is being led by the OEMs, and we've seen just a slew of announcements. Fastener manufacturer ITW, they've not given specific numbers, but they clearly indicated in their last earnings call that they are now switching to mode to where they're looking to raise prices on their products to offset some of these raw material costs. But again, it's not just fasteners. We're hearing it in motors, we're hearing it in bearings, we're hearing it in welding supplies. So, there is a broad move afoot to try to raise prices as a means of dealing with these increases. And by the way, we've been seeing some increases in raw materials for the past 12 to 18 months of this expansion, but it's really only been recently that you've been seeing, a much more rapid move to raise prices. So to answer the question of when would you expect the fastener distributors and the like would begin to see it, I would say that that's going to be something of a near-term event. We will use Fastenal as a bit of a proxy. Fastenal last year had some intention to raise prices, found they never really had to do so, and now they're talking again about having to raise prices. And so I think these increases, which are very evident in the manufacturing base, you're kind of at the tipping point where that's going to be moving forward and going to have to be dealt with by the distribution base as well. So I don't see this as a future risk. This is really more of a clear and present danger in terms of managing your costs and managing your margins. And so I really think that most companies need to be reasonably aggressive on this at this point to avoid getting left too far behind.
So the takeaway, price increases, and that's not news, but I suppose you stated it very, very clearly there for us, so we'll keep our eyes open for it. Moving on, already in 2011, we've seen consolidation in the market domestically and some competitors leaving the market. Most notably at this moment is the HTI story, of course. How are you reading this, Holden?
Well, and I think that it's representative of three broader trends. The first is consolidation has and remains really inevitable in the distribution space. Your listeners know it. Your listeners have been through it. Your listeners have seen it. It's not a new trend. But I would say that right now the environment is probably unusually hostile to smaller players. I'm an advocate that over time you are going to see sort of a bifurcating of the distribution market towards larger, broadline, tougher to distinguish players, and then smaller, niche, nimble players. And it's really that middle that tends to get carved out. And those larger players really have the tools in place right now to be able to make that happen. They have cash, they have financial flexibility, and more importantly, they have an attitude that we haven't seen in the past where they really are going aggressively at customers. We speak to one distributor who I won't name, but they indicated that in the past they might pursue parts of certain customers' business, and parts of it they may not want, may not fit their model all that well, so they would tend to leave it with the competitive distributors. This cycle, they are going for the entire swath of business, and so I think that you are seeing bigger players more aggressive in this market to try to push that consolidation. So whereas it's really not much different from the trends you've seen in the past, I would caution your listeners that it definitely is it's being raised in profile internally at these larger distributors, and they're pursuing it more aggressively than what we've seen in the past. That's one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that during the downturn, I think most are very surprised at how few companies went under. There was actually an article recently in Supply House Times of 4 distributors, including Win Wholesale, that were, their chief executives were chatting with the interviewer, and they all agreed that it was surprising how few distributors went under. But they also commented that maybe a lot of the behavior that allowed these distributors to get through the downturn was the type of behavior that's going to make it hard to survive in the expansion, and you might be seeing some of that. This might be a bit of a delayed reaction to the downturn that we just came through. And then the third thing I would sort of throw out there is I think it's hard for master distributors. The fact is, a lot of distributors have more cash. A lot of distributors are keeping more and a broader range of inventory on hand to be able to service their customers faster. And to some extent, that carves into the role of the master distributor. And so I think that there's a little bit of that taking place as well. And as that occurs and as that market maybe gets a little bit smaller, there's a need for fewer of the players, and some of those players, clearly if they get themselves a little bit out on a limb, that can sort of be the death knell for them. So I would say that those 3 items were probably at play, culminated in what we've seen at Heads and Threads, but I'd be surprised if that's the only company that we hear of or see that has these kind of issues over the next 12 to 18 months.
Well, we'll all be staying tuned for that. Thanks for that perspective. What should fully threaded listeners be watching for as we close out the first quarter, Holden?
Sure. Well, I think that this is a good time to change our mindset a little bit in the sense that whereas we always have to be diligent and be looking for where the other shoe might drop on the economy and demand and that sort of thing, the fact is the numbers right now and the momentum and the trend is such that I don't think that the economy should be anybody's first and primary source of concern at this point. And that being the case, I think it's really important that listeners begin to get back to a mindset of investing in their business again, if they haven't already. Certainly we're seeing that out of the larger distributors. I would say that of all the distributors that we cover and speak to and follow, I can't think of any that have not shifted their mindset back towards adding salespeople or adding stores or adding inventory or doing the myriad little things they need to grow the business. They clearly are not turtling and trying to preserve costs and preserve margin. They're looking to invest in the business, gain market share, and grow. And smaller players who might be a bit more reticent to put recent history behind them, the further behind you get on that investment mode, the harder it's going to be to catch up as maybe they take a salesperson here or there. So I think that the best you can look for going into 2011 is worry less about the economy, worry more about taking advantage of the growth opportunities that economy allows for you, and then pay attention to that price-cost relationship, because right now that does appear to be the primary threat that we see on the near-term horizon.
Well, that sounds like excellent advice if you can pull it off. Holden Lewis, you are an analyst for BB&T Capital Markets. Thanks for joining us so much.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Joining us now is Tom Buddenbohn. He's the chairman for the NFDA Membership Committee. He's also a partner at Technology Components Southwest, and they're based out of Fort Worth, Texas. However, we're speaking to him now from Stuttgart, Germany, and that's the site of this year's Stuttgart Fastener Fair that's being put on by Mack Brooks Exhibitions. Tom, welcome. What are you seeing over there in Stuttgart?
Good morning, Eric. Actually, it's afternoon here. It's what you might expect in Stuttgart. It's a fresh, cool day with a little snow in the afternoon, and all generally very nice. It's interesting because the attendance at the show is very sound. They're projecting more than 6,000 visitors.
Wow.
This show puts a physically a large footprint. It's in three buildings or 3 halls of the 8 halls here in Stuttgart. I would guess each of the halls is easily 200,000 square feet. I'm guessing at that, but they're large. It's a very manageable show from a walking perspective. It's brightly lit, and the booths are larger than what we're accustomed to in the North American shows, which makes it feel a little bit like it's not very crowded. But everybody I've spoken with today is telling me that they're having really good attendance in their booths and good participation. So
they were expecting something over 600 exhibitors. Do you know if that came out?
That did come out. They have this year. They have, I think it's 675 exhibitors.
Wow.
670 exhibitors, and that's up from about 625 in 2009. And in 2009, they had just about 6,000 visitors, and they don't have the numbers in. Obviously, this is just day one, but they are expecting at least that many, if not more. So.
Now, today's the first day of the show, which runs 3 days. It's February 22nd through the 24th, and you would expect this would be one of the heavier days, right?
Well, interestingly, it's a manageable day. Everybody seems to think tomorrow is going to be much busier. So it's a nice pace. Never do you feel crowded in the show, so it's moving at an easy pace to walk through the aisles and not be standing 3 deep at a booth. So if it's busier tomorrow, it might be a little more crowded at each booth. But I've heard no one complain about the amount of traffic, either too much or too little.
Oh, perfect. Now, you're camped out at the NFDA booth, and we can hear the crowds in the background. Yeah, but before we talk about the NFDA mission, do you get a sense for what's the theme of the show this year? Is there a buzz in the air that you happen to take note of at this point?
Absolutely. I think the buzz here is the fact that business overall is improving everywhere in the world. Everybody seems to have is talking about increased sales and increased business activity. This show has an interesting supply-based footprint. A lot of European manufacturers, even Eastern Europe, as well as the normal group of Asian suppliers. What's missing here, from my perspective, is there are very few U.S. manufacturing companies here. There's a nice pool of NFDA members from around the U.S., but they're all distributors. The other thing that we're hearing is, obviously, I think this is common knowledge, that the material costs are rising, probably just a simple supply and demand situation. But as business improves, materials are going up in cost, and I'm hearing from a couple suppliers that lead times are getting a little bit longer. So I think we have the same thing from our domestic suppliers in the States. So.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, just this morning I saw the headlines were speaking to the dramatic rise overnight in energy prices. And, of course, with the turmoil in the Mideast, the proximity of Stuttgart is a lot closer. Are you hearing anything about what's going on there?
You know, other than the news, the CNBC or whatever's on the TV here in the morning, there was a lot of discussion about, I think, Libya this morning. But all in all, there doesn't seem to be any conversation here at the show or with the attendees about the unrest in the Middle East. So I think either people are insulated from the news, or they're just not. It's not on their plate this week.
And I guess I have to ask, in other current events, of course, in the U.S., everybody's talking about what may or may not be happening with HTI. Any word that you've heard from the floor on that subject?
You know, what I've heard, Eric, is been very little hard comment. There has been a few people speculating, but really I was expecting more conversation about what's apparently pending there, but it's really been very quiet. So,
interesting.
A few opinions, as you can imagine, but all in all, it's been very quiet. I have not seen anybody from HTI here, which really shouldn't be a surprise, I guess.
Right. Well, as I mentioned, you're camped out at the NFDA booth, and the NFDA had a trade mission to this show. And could you tell us a little bit about that, and how is that all unfolding so far?
Yeah, the NFDA's mission really hits on a couple of things. I think the first objective was to expand kind of the footprint of the NFDA and expand the network of contacts, a little more global presence. put together a nice trip. I think there's probably maybe 12 or 15 U.S. folks here. There are, I think there's 7 sponsored distributors and suppliers that are here from the U.S. But the goal was to find ways to possibly sell into Europe from the U.S. One of the visitors here is one of the guys that came from the U.S. is actually looking at the possibility of putting a facility here to support one of his customers that has a number of manufacturing locations. And this has turned out, in addition, it's turned out to be a really nice environment to meet with your suppliers and your customers. We have a meeting scheduled for Wednesday morning with the U.S. Department of Commerce Export Office, to learn a little bit more about exporting to Europe. My personal mission here was less about selling and more about sourcing. I've got some customers that are looking to simplify their life in buying from a local U.S. source, even if it's European-produced product, but buying from a U.S. source that will simplify their buying and inventory requirements.
Well, it sounds like the NFDA is fulfilling its mission then with the internationalization component at least, and we'll be interested to hear the report after the show. I know you're just getting underway.
Yeah. No, it's been good. It's mid-afternoon here, about 4 o'clock, and I know we've had a couple of companies come up and speak to the NFDA, whoever was in the booth, about membership, and so I think that's also always part of the mission to locate and identify prospective members and explain to them how they can find value in being part of the NFDA.
Absolutely. Well, getting back to the show floor for a moment, is there anything out there on the show floor that seems kind of as an outstanding centerpiece, as we would typically expect one of the larger distributors would have kind of a large, expansive booth? Is that the case over there in Stuttgart this time around?
Interestingly, the booths here are, I would say, at a minimum about 15 feet by 15 feet, so they're number one, they're just more spacious than we're accustomed to seeing, whether it's a small tabletop show or the Columbus or Vegas show. And the way the format is laid out, it just feels like it's spread out more and not crowded. Like I said earlier, it just has a very comfortable feel. There's a beautiful Porsche at the next booth from the NFDA, 2 booths over. It's actually some kind of a race car. I didn't look at the details, but and there's a good-looking old VW bus, probably mid-'60s VW bus, 2 booths the other way. But as far as presentation, there's a lot of companies that have bigger booths that I did not recognize the names of, that are obviously European trading companies or European distribution companies. But there's some interesting booths. It's an attractive show. I guess that's the right word for it.
Well, then I have to ask, with the day winding down, a man's thoughts turn to the powerful thirsties developed during the day, standing out on the show floor. And let me ask you this, as a guy from the Fort Worth area, is there anywhere that looks likely a man could pour himself a cold Busch Light after a day on the floor?
Honestly, I don't think so. Maybe a Hefeweizen or a porter or something, but yeah, most of the beer here is not particularly light as we know it, but I enjoyed a couple of cold beers last night, or moderately cold beers maybe. So this place, it's got good food and it's got great beer.
Well, glad to hear it, and I hope you get quite a bit of chance to experience that over the next 2 days. And as we were speaking, I was looking at the photo on the website, which is www.fastenerfair.com, and there's a kind of an overhead, and you can get an idea of what Tom's describing there with the layout of the booths and things. And they do look a little bit different from what we'd experience certainly at NIFS or a similar show.
Yeah, like I said, it's a very comfortable, spread-out show with a big footprint, and we appreciate the fact, too, that the people that put this show on actually gave NFDA the space. It's called the Fastener Fair, and it's put on by a company called Mack Brooks Exhibitions, and it's a nice team. We met with the leader this morning with some ideas on how to improve our participation in the show, not only as NFDA but as visitors. And I'll comment on this because there's another show coming up here. This show is every 2 years, and we discussed why there weren't more Americans here, and the comments range from perceived cost and the distance to travel. And the fact is that you do travel overnight to get here, but this is a great city, and very easy to move around this city, whether it's public transportation, if you're on the rail line, if you're flying in, there are hotels in the shadow of the airport, and attached to the airport is the trade center. So you don't need to rent a car, you don't have to do much in terms of travel. And so it's a very friendly city from that perspective.
And it is currently the largest fastener show of its kind in the world, so it seems like it's really hit its stride.
Yes, it's that's what they're saying. It's the largest. So.
Well, Tom Buddenbohn, we appreciate your reportage from this Fastener Fair Stuttgart 2011, and we look forward to talking to you when you get back.
Perfect. That'll be great. And don't forget, we do have an NFDA meeting coming up in April 6th, 7th, and 8th at the PGA Resort in West Palm Beach. Please plan to attend that meeting. If you're an NFDA member or a prospective NFDA member, certainly get a hold of one of us, and we will get you plugged in if you're not a member to join that meeting. It'll be a good meeting, and probably be the last of the resort-style meetings for NFDA for a while. We'll go more to a more of a city-type meeting in the future. So, but it's a wonderful place to go. Wonderful golf, great tennis facilities, and a phenomenal pool. So, in between your meetings and conferences, you can find a little time to relax.
Well, you're the membership chairman of the NFDA, and you just did a good job in making the case for attending this spring's conference, that's for sure. Tom Buddenbohn, thanks once again for joining us, and we'll talk to you when you get back.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Next up, Rob Lucas on the Heads and Threads story. Stick around with Fully Threaded.
This is Tom Buddenbohn. I am the membership chair for the NFDA and the partner in Technology Components Southwest. I'd like to invite you to consider membership in the NFDA. Some of the benefits to membership include tremendous industry networking, business education via the Institute for Trend Research, economic insights with the quarterly trend reports from a service that's provided to us, global perspective when buying and selling all over the world, tremendous benefit in information sources from Asia and Europe, gives you an opportunity to strengthen your relationship with other members, both suppliers and distributors. We offer an annual meeting that has ESPS session, which are a series of 30-minute scheduled meetings with existing companies you do business with, and more importantly, with companies that you don't do business with and want to learn a little more about. Our goal is to gain new members, both distributors and associates or manufacturers and large importers. And we also want to invite back those that have dropped out of NFDA in the past due to some of the economic issues of the past couple of years. It's a great association with great members. Please take a peek at www.nfda-fastener.org, or you can call the office for NFDA at area code 312-673-4900. Thank you again, Tom Buddenbohn with Technology Components and the NFDA.
This is Sue Rice with the FCH team. It's my job to make sure that as an FCH member, you receive the highest possible benefit from your participation in the network. Did you know that once you're logged into FCH, you have access to exclusive search tools, site statistics, and tracking information about your inventory and source finder inquiries? It's all just a click away, and I'm happy to walk you through it. If it's time to refresh your inventory, don't worry. We'll run your listings through our scrubber software and get you up and running in a very short time. If you can attach a spreadsheet to an email, you can list inventory on FCH. We can also show you how to optimize your listings to attract the most hits for your type of fastener. Send email to Sue at fastenersclearinghouse.com and let me help you get the most from the FCH sourcing network. I look forward to hearing from you soon.
Lou Ruffini with Vermetco Sales, Central New York's leading fastener industrial supply house, listening to Fully Threaded Radio.
Rob Lucas is the man behind Fidelis Fasteners, and he joins us again. This time, I think, from the Chicago area. Is that right, Rob?
You are absolutely correct. I am home again. How about that for being around locally the last two times we've talked? Of course, yeah. I'm heading out in a week and a half again to Asia, so short-lived trip.
Yeah, how could I have guessed? Well, welcome back. It's been all the way since early December since we had you on.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me back. It's been a fairly busy new year. Of course, the holidays were relatively slow, I think, for everybody. But looks like we're picking up steam in the market. Things are going good, other than the recent news. But barring that, it seems to be rather positive.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. Well, of course, Fidelis has some big news, and we're going to get to that for sure. But, of course, there were some really big headlines that hit the news earlier. Well, when was it? About a week back now we were recording this. Want to comment on what's been going on?
Well, are you talking about Steve Jobs and the potential new iPhone 5?
Oh, you're an episode or two late for that one.
Well, I don't know what's going on. Anyways, I heard the rumor today that they're going to make an iPhone Nano. I was reading that this morning in the USA Today.
Yeah, right. I heard that as well. I think that's more than a rumor, though. I think that's actually going to come to pass.
Yeah, there was no definitive answer from it, so I thought that was the news you were talking about. But I'm sure you're talking about the recent news in the fastener industry about heads and threads.
That's right. I know you're in a position to deal with people who are really affected by that. And we were talking earlier in the show, just to put it out there, that there was a report that came out, and it might have been a little bit premature. Of course, there were some layoffs earlier in the week, and there was a report that came out that was only partially correct, I guess. But the upshot of it is that there's some upheaval there right now. There's probably a lot that's going to come out. We don't know a lot factually yet, but the fact of the matter is there's some upheaval over our heads going on right now.
Yeah, I think that the report from the Fin was not 100%. As far as I know, what I understand about it is, I've got some friends there that at Heads and Threads. Of course, I've got a history there. And I've got some friends that did work there until Monday. I'm not aware of it being a layoff. From what the headline stated, it's clearly not a layoff, as far as what I understand. And as far as I understand too, I do not believe that there's any receivership or bankruptcy that has been technically filed. Now, of course, the reality of it is that they are clearly in some issue, some trouble. And I think that bottom line is Heads and Threads is going away. The question is, how is it going to go away? And I think that's what everybody has been talking about since Monday. This was kind of hit the streets, I would say somewhere around 10:30, 11 o'clock on Monday morning. And it has been the overwhelming topic from both domestic and abroad all week long. I've had a lot of discussions. I was actually on the road this past week. And, when the news hit, I was on the road making sales calls Monday. So, of course, that was, the thunder everyone wanted to talk about. And then, of course, that night, it really started with the vendors overseas. Now, there had been some discussions prior to this with vendors about some potential worries, and it was kind of solidified on Monday. So the vendors are a little bit worried. Quite frankly, I don't blame them. I think that there's some potential troubles here for these guys that I'm not quite sure what that means to the market, but I got my own opinion and a common sense thought of what potentially could happen to this. So, that's the message out there is they have gone away. They're not gone yet. They're still in operation. There's still salespeople there. They're still selling parts. I'm not marketing for them, but for anybody to think that they're out of business effective today is not, it's not accurate. They're still, it's business as usual to some extent for them for the short term. And the short term could probably, in my opinion, would be 6 to 10 weeks or sooner.
Well, if you read around, I think there was even a post on LinkedIn and possibly out on Twitter. People have been throwing around the May 1st date. Does that resonate with anything you've heard?
Well, there's some logic behind that I'm certainly not going to speculate on. But knowing the position that everybody knows that they're in, whether or not it is true receivership is one thing. The bottom line is they're done, and that's going to affect it. Now, what's the date, May 1st? I don't know where that date came from. I think if you look at it from February 14th is the date that started, and you take that out to 6 to 10 week time frame, there you have it. That's probably an accurate date of when you won't see any operations from heads and threads. But again, that's a lot of speculation, and I don't want to say that I'm speaking the facts. I can give you my opinion, which is probably pretty accurate. But that's where we sit. I don't know where that came from, though. The date of May 1st.
Right. Well, as you said, it's been a thundercloud on the horizon of the industry, that's for sure. I mean, all week I was talking to people. I must have talked to 50 distributors during the week, and they all of them wanted to talk about it. That's for sure. I heard a lot of different things. I know they can't all be true.
Well, I spoke, like you, I was on the phone from Monday morning, through Saturday. I think I spoke more this past week than I have in the last 2 months via the phone. And that was, without Skype or anything else, just direct phone calls. There was Monday and Tuesday where I literally, didn't sleep one of those nights because I was dealing with vendors overseas. They're trying to talk about this and find out what was going on and getting their feedback. And they've got some legitimate worries. And of course, that's my focus, is to support the vendors. Obviously I support distributors, but without those vendors, we're all kind of left without source of supply. So I like to keep my fingers close to as best as possible to what they're doing, what they see, and I think I have a pretty good feel for where they sit, and it doesn't appear to be very positive for the rest of the world.
Well, that's an issue that you're in a very good position to comment on, and that being the position of the overseas suppliers. But before we talk about that for a minute, let me just ask you: do you think that what we're seeing here with threads, does this speak to what's going on competitively in the market right now for the importers? I mean, are we seeing kind of a shakeout here, or how do you read this?
I don't know. I think that, quite frankly, there's obviously been some pricing wars. Everyone's aware of that. And I think that there's too many of them. I think everybody said that when Bright & Best, who I think you're referring to, came into this arena. And at that point, there's basically 5 master importers. That's a whole lot of master importers that have saturated this market, and it's caused and led to some price battles, some true competitive. Let's maintain some business as well as try to grow it. I think that has a factor or a portion to do with what's really going on here. I think that at the end of the day, that's still a very, very small part of it. Now, I think some are disagree with me and say, oh no, Bright & Best came in here, or whomever it may be. And I don't want to really name any names, but whomever it may be. And the only way I say Bright & Best is because they're the newest player on the block. Whatever the turn of events were, I believe that this competitive nature was certainly a part of it. But I think that there's many, many other facets to this. I think you've got an economy that's been in a downturn for a while. That's got to play heavy on the weight of an owner group of heads and threads. You're not, or any master importer for that fact. You're not seeing the kind of margins you used to. I think margins are eroding because of the competitiveness, but you still have this pressure from both customers and overseas for pricing. You've got customers who want the lowest possible price, and you've got vendors over there who have to deal with price increases. Hell, we just had one in I think January 3rd from CSC in Taiwan. That's an increase. Somebody has to deal with that. There were increases last year. Those things play into all this. And when you're talking about an economy that went down, and you're talking about costing that's relatively going up, to say the least, that has a lot of pressure to the business. How do you borrow against that? And if you can borrow, that's the real rub. Your banks aren't today willing to loan money like they were 3 or 4 years ago, and I think everyone's aware of that. So there's a whole lot of pressure there. The amount of inventory that a master importer holds, is really, really, crucial to how they operate. A lot of it's done most of it's done through a rearview mirror forecast. You look at last year's buy and you kind of go forward on that. There's not a whole lot of, we know what's going on in the market for the upcoming year. There's a lot of speculation. And if you make the wrong move, lo and behold, you've got yourself a whole lot of parts that you can't sell, which causes you some duress, or the opposite, where you don't have enough parts and you've got some serious duress.
Well, in a big way, it seems like it's almost the perfect storm for heads. But in a way also, it sounds like you're actually talking about the whole model. Well,
I've got a soft spot in my heart for heads. I think everybody that knows me knows that. I work there. I got a lot of friends that are still there. I think that it's one of the oldest master importers in the States. It's got a lot of great history with it. It's actually really, really sad news, I think, for everybody, even their competitors. It's more of a shock. Most of the things I heard this week were, I can't believe it. And quite frankly, I can't believe it either. I never expected this. I would have expected somebody to go away, and I thought they were probably the weakest link in the chain. But this is not how I think anybody really saw this coming to play, as them just going away. I kind of thought there'd be somebody to buy them or some merger, or some different type of a market change instead of somebody just closing their doors. That's the shock. And I think people are still going, I can't believe it. So, when you talk about a model, that has been, in my opinion, that and a quarter will get you a cup for coffee, is those guys have been doing the same business model, master importers, for decades. And, quite frankly, I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't want to speculate on it because I don't know each and every one of them. I've got obviously a little bit of insight on the heads. I would make some assumptions that they're all relatively the same to some extent. I can't think of anything truly progressive out of the master importers or the fastener industry really in the last decade. The last 2 decades, it's relatively been the same model since conception, and I can't think of things that stay the same. I guess I'm obviously biased on it, but think about it. What has remained the same in this world for 20, 30, 40 years? I can't think of anything. When I'm at my first job, I had a bag phone. Now you got phones that are so small they fit in your front pocket. Now they're talking about the iPod Nano or the iPhone Nano.
Yeah, you were saying.
So change is sometimes hard, but it's also a good thing, and it leads to different tactics in business. This could be a part of it. Again, there's a whole lot of factors here that weigh onto this, and I think everybody has to look at this thing from what are those factors, and really quite at the end of the day, what does that mean to me? Where do I sit in all this? And there's a whole lot of people talking about their own speculations, and I have my own and opinions on this. And that's the key to this. It's opinions. Until the dust settles, I don't think anybody knows. I can tell you that there's going to be some pitfalls to this, no two ways about it. We just don't know what those are just yet.
So let's get back for a minute to what's going on with the foreign suppliers. This is an area where you have particular expertise, and would you like to comment on what you've been hearing so far from their side of things?
Well, the vendors are really, they're in more shock than anybody, I guess is the best way to put this. This causes them some major pain. There's inventory that they've either shipped, or there's inventory that that they're made or they're making that potentially now does not have a home. If you've got parts on your floor that were sold to somebody, now you don't have a place to go with them. Where do you go with that? What do you do? And I think they're worried. I think the other side of it is too, hey, here's a guy who's been around for, half a century, who's been a consistent customer of ours day in and day out, and has kind of given us a lifeline over this period of time we've dealt with them. Now they're gone. And they're a big guy. Yeah, they're one of I wouldn't say the biggest, but they're one of the biggest guys in the fastener industry as far as, importing fasteners. If you're a vendor and you hear that one of these big guys is just out of business, I think you take pause and go, what does that mean? Am I at risk? Are others at risk? What's going on with the U.S.? Is this a flawed model? Are other guys going to be the same thing? They have all these questions now, and I don't think there's anybody that can give them a solid answer, or has given them a solid answer of today.
So boiling it all down then, what's the impact for the mid-size or small distributor? I mean, how does this translate?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. There's a thought process that I think everybody is thinking where these guys are going to go away. There's a whole lot of inventory that's going to be shuffled and moved to either master importers or distributors or potentially end users. Who knows how it's going to all come to play? But the basic thought behind that is this inventory is going to be sold out in this market at a better cost than it would have been out of heads and threads, which means people are going to buy this at some discount. I don't know what that discount would be and to what extent or what level it will be, but it's going to be a discount. That to me, I think short term is, I guess, a good thing. You'll keep pricing relatively stable, or we'll not see massive increases. But I think also you've got a major company who's got a whole lot of inventory that's now going to be distributed amongst everybody, master importers down to end users and all points in between. That'll probably slow up some buys overseas, which means now these guys have an added pain. Not only did we get stuck with some of this inventory or some of these problems that are going on, we now may not see the kind of orders that we did or have in the past. And, I think that's, that's harsh. And I say this, kind of tongue in cheek, but there's money here that you could talk about potentially putting vendors out of business. And that isn't going to sit well with really anybody. And, that's the thing that people need to look at down the road from this. And down the road could be 6 months, it could be 2 years, but down the road, if somebody loses money, they're going to make it back up. And the only way I can think of today that they can make it back up is obviously through price increases. Who pays for a price increase? I think that's bottom line is end users and distributors. The master importers aren't really going to pay for that. Yeah, they're going to pay for the price increases and pass them along to somebody else. But at the end of the day, point of use is where it's really going to be, the heaviest hit. And I don't know how that changes or what it does to the landscape in this industry. This is big news, though. It's not something to go, well, they went away and there's always somebody else. That's 100% true. There's going to be other players that are going to take their spot or fill those niches. But I think it changes the landscape. And that's just common sense and a whole lot of my opinion, but I do believe it to be true.
Well, if you had to take a guess, and under that scenario, and there's kind of this bubble of inventory for a while before price increases are the result, what kind of a time period would you be thinking about?
I wouldn't dare guess because the dust hasn't settled from this. I've been kind of making this statement for the last week of hey, we all know that the A-bomb went off. We're just farther away from ground zero. We haven't felt the fallout. When does that fallout hit? I don't know the answer to that. There could be things that change, as early as yesterday that we don't know about that are going to be announced tomorrow, or vice versa. There's things in this that until we have a better definitive idea of really what's going on here, or until, of course, their doors are closed down and there's, the change has happened, I don't know if anybody will know the impact of that. I don't think the vendors have any idea of today where that impact is. I certainly think that people are taking pause to this. There's no two ways about it. If a big guy can go out that's been doing this for a lot of years with me, what's to say that a smaller guy can't? And there's two thoughts of schools. Things will be the same. The market tends to work itself out, and it'll all be okay. And the other school of thought is, well, these guys are going to change the way they come to market, and they have the potential to do that, which could be terms, secured shipments, LCs, things like that. I don't know if those hold water, but I think they're deserving of people to think about. I think if you were trying to go overseas and you thought, well, I'll do it in March, your odds of getting credit in terms obviously just got weaker because of this. I'm not saying you can't get it, but I certainly think it's going to cause those people some worry about how they ship and move parts.
Well, thanks for that analysis, and I guess it's probably a really good segue into the next group of questions that I guess I have for you, and that is, what are you doing with Fidelis to kind of smooth the way out for your clients? And maybe we should mention the big piece of news that you just made this week, and that is you got some new hands on board, don't you?
Yeah, I do. The thunder was taken from this news, but I hired Jackie Ventura away from the IFAS group, and she started with me on Monday, February 14th, the same day as this recent news has came out. And that to me is great. It's kind of solidifying Fidelis in the market. I'm growing it. Obviously, I'm looking to support my customer base more. It allows me to do and to have some other channels to manage the market in the States, of course, work the booths and do other things like that. It shows. But it's testimony that, hey, we're doing what our customers want us to do. And that's the whole name of what I've tried to do, is service the customer the best possible way I can, keep cost as low as possible. I'm not putting up, 100 people. I'm not obviously not putting up a 100,000 square foot brick and mortar facility. There's a lot of things I'm trying to do to maintain costs while also supporting the customers. And as this thing grows, I'm going to have to continue to add people just because one man can't do it all, or two. But it's grown up. It's going up. It's been here now long enough that I think people get it. I think this recent news is potentially good for myself and others because it's going to make people think about how they go to market and how they procure parts. And of course, I've been touting from the rooftop since I left Heads and Threads, by the way. And I left Heads to start Fidelis because I thought this was a great model. And so for me, it's kind of a double testimony. I left a great company with a great job to come and do, this giant risk. And here I am, a few years later, and the risk is paid off. I've got some employees. We're doing some things. We're growing, and we're servicing the market. So, yeah, it's great news for me. I'm really, really lucky to have Jackie. She's got a tremendous amount of, fastener history and knowledge, and she's got great tentacles into the market. And she's just a good, well-rounded person. I really like her. We get along well, and I think it can only be good.
Well, congratulations again on that. Now, I have to ask you did mention trade show booths there a moment ago. Is the woman's touch going to bring any sprucing up to your trade show layout there? You going to get some carpeting now, Rob? What are we to expect?
I know you like to rib me about that. I'm not sure if there's one thing for certain. The little old Fidelis sign is staying in the background. I've already talked to Jackie about that, and I've told her that if she talks to you on the side to not take your pressure. My sales pitch is, hey, I'm keeping this lousy booth and keep my costs down so I can pass those savings along to my customers. But you're right. I've got someone else now that's probably going to say, hey, you need to fix this thing up a little bit.
That's right.
I'll try to keep it as low budget as possible, but I'm sure there's some changes in the wind.
Fair enough. Well, that's a model that I think is going to work for you. So, you keep it up too.
I appreciate it.
And we saw that you were on the cover of the AFJ there last issue, and that was with the Global Fastener Network, of course. And are there any developments you have to report on that front?
Well, it's GFN, or Global Fastener Network. I call it GFN. It's for short. Is up and running. We're acquiring members. We've already acquired members. We've already acquired preferred suppliers. I'm working on some more. As this thing gets steam behind it, we'll add more and more, and we'll do more and more unique things. It's slow and steady wins the race. I didn't expect to, win the world right out of the gate, but I firmly believe that what's happened this week is giving people thought to look at this, and I think that's good. I'm not here to tell everybody that this is the best possible way. My customers that have seen me are going to understand that. I say, hey, this may or may not be for you. It doesn't fit for every model, but there are a lot of distributors out there that this makes perfect sense for, and I think they get it. And I've done some things to tailor it to fit the demand that I guess I didn't see at startup, and it's working. I'm trying to get as many members that make sense to play, and I'm also trying to get as many preferred suppliers as can be that make sense to play, and both are happening. It seems I'm getting more preferred suppliers faster than I am members, but I've got both, and I think for members, they really have to do some assessment. When you're talking about this kind of spend and going to overseas in this fashion, they have to look at their spend, their purchasing systems, how they want to do this, how they want to manage the inventory. That takes a little bit of time. So, no one has said that's a terrible idea. There's people that have said, hey, I can't do it. And there's other people that say, I need a couple of weeks to assess this. And once they get those couple of weeks, they usually join. So, I guess the long and short of it is it's here to stay.
Well, good to hear. And market shakeups like we're experiencing right now have a way of opening doors for a lot of folks, and hopefully you're one of them.
Yeah, I hope that. And this kind of goes to light for you too. This news, as unfortunate as it may be, like I said, I've got friends there, I've got history there. I'd never wish this on anybody, but it is what it is. And the rest of us kind of have to just deal with what we've been dealt with and go. And to me, the selfish, self-serving marketing side of me says, look, this is why I left Heads, to go do this, because I think the master importer model is just slightly different than what some people need. I certainly don't believe that master importers should go away. I think they have a home, and I think that there's a lot of people that need to play with them. But I also think and I also know there's a lot of people that, either dabble or deal with overseas. And my model is a way for them to, get some advantages out of doing that without having all that added cost to it. And they're going to do it no matter what. And I think GFN is another one of those kind of businesses that basically service distributors. My whole goal is to service distributors while maintaining a great reputation with the vendors. So I think with the recent news of what's happened here, for the distributors listening out there, you have to kind of stand back, take pause, and look at this thing and go, okay, what do I need to do differently, if anything? And some people don't, but others do. And, just like Fidelis and GFN, FCH is something that's, relatively new, but it has a fit and a home in this market. You've seen some growth out of FCH. It's slow and steady wins the race. Nobody likes change but a wet baby. And as this thing kind of goes, I think people get it. Well, this is something for people to, like you said, because of this major news, people, tend to get some business. I think that this is going to make people think. And if people think and they look at things in maybe a little different perspective, all we're trying to do, your company, my company, and others like us, is to give customers just another avenue, another lane in the highway for them to utilize to potentially help their business along. Nothing is the end-all, be-all. And anyone that says it is just wrong. But there's a lot of different ways to do a whole lot of different businesses. There's a whole lot of, there's more business than probably anybody can handle, both the biggest master importer to the smallest distributor. Nobody can have it all.
Well, I like the sound of that. And for folks who want to get a little bit more info on what Rob's talking about right now, he'll be presenting a seminar at the NIFS East Show in Columbus. That's happening April 26th and 27th. And, of course, he's got a website for Fidelis, and that's at www.fidelisfasteners.com. There's also a website for Global Fastener Network, and that one is appropriately named www.globalfastenernetwork.com. Isn't that right?
That is correct. There's not a whole lot of bells and whistles, but it certainly gets you some information and potentially get you in contact with me or one of the employees, and we can help you out and do the things we need to do to support you or to give you some more information on potentially doing this. I'd welcome an opportunity to at least discuss it. if nothing else, you gain some information. Again, when you talk to, and I appreciate the plug for the show in Columbus. I'm not quite sure. The topic is obviously going to be something about a market update, and I think this recent news is going to be a part of that discussion. I think by then we'll have a much better feel for where this dust all settles. And kind of turning this back around to where we started at. It's big enough news that I think people ought to not take it lightly, but they ought to not take a whole lot of weight in rumors that are published or said. And what I mean by that is none of us know the true story and probably won't know the entire true story unless you were, of course, directly involved in it. But in the meantime, you still have to think about it and go, what does this mean? And what does this mean not only to me but to this industry? I think it's a monstrous change to this industry in some fashion. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but I think it's going to be rough. I think the next year or two, this kind of an earthquake has some long-lasting aftershocks. And if you've got vendors overseas that you deal with currently, or somebody that helps you deal with vendors overseas currently, you got to extend that olive branch and tell these guys, hey, if you need help, I'll certainly help you. I think they're looking for some help. I think they want to, they want to know what they can do, and they're not alone. And I think we need to tell them that, because at the end of the day, unless you're buying 100% domestic, and there's nothing wrong with that, but if you're buying overseas, that's your lifeline, and you need to talk to these guys and say, is there anything I can do to help you out? Because at the end of the day, we're all buying from basically the same supply base, and this is something that we're all going to pay the price for it, in some fashion. So if you know somebody, you're dealing with a vendor overseas, can't hurt to say, hey, are you okay? Do you need help? Is there anything I can do for you? If there is, great. Assist them. It'll help your relationships with them long term. It'll help them out of a short-term bind if they have any, and maybe it'll make this industry just a little bit more smoother as this change goes through.
Well, Rob, you've been very generous with us during the last year with your contributions and your analysis, and we really appreciate it, and I hope you'll join us again in the near future as this story becomes more clear.
Yeah, I'll have a much better feel for a lot of things like everybody else. I'm also, I've got my trip booked. I was actually going to leave today for China, and I had postponed it because of this, because I wanted to see if there was a little bit of dust that would be settled before, I could go over there. Because, of course, my interest is with my clients to make sure that the vendors understand that my clients, here's their situation, here's their financial situation, here's what they're doing, and to get in front of these guys and say, I know all the other things that are going on. We're really sorry that all happened, but I also have a responsibility to my distributors and my customer base that says, these guys have been working with you. We're here to stay, and we're here to support you. So, the next couple of weeks I'll be over there. Probably be a 2.5 to 3 week trip where I see both China, Taiwan, and probably Thailand and Vietnam on this trip. Certainly Hong Kong I've got to go and do some visit to quickly. So it's going to be a fairly extensive trip to Asia. And the intent for me is to see as many factories as I possibly can and relay what message I can as factual as I can to them. And I'll be glad to give you some feedback upon my return to that, and to the listeners of this show to kind of fill them in on what I see and what I hear.
Rob Lucas, Fidelis Fasteners, thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. And as always, I'll talk to you soon.
There's more Fully Threaded coming up, so stick around.
FastenersClearinghouse.com. Search and source from over 500,000 line items, all just a mouse click away and available at no charge. When the need arises, you won't find a better place to locate hard-to-find fastener inventory. It's where you need to be.
This is Joe Truckee of Cal Fasteners, and Fasteners Clearinghouse works for us.
This is Robert Wanzer, and Fasteners Clearinghouse works for American Imperial.
This is Andy Pell from ScrewCrew.com, and FCH works for the fastener industry.
Join the sourcing network now and show your inventory to a whole new market. Turn slow movers into cash. List up to 10,000 line items. Show them to distributors only or to the world. FastenersClearinghouse.com. It's where you need to be.
Hi, this is Hugh Hewitt for the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund, www.semperfifund.org. Over the past 7 years, twice a year, the wonderful people who operate the Semper Fi Fund and many amazing Marines who have been the beneficiaries of the charities that have supported the Semper Fi Fund, including many thousands of individual donors, have come into my radio studio to tell their amazing stories of serving their country, of being wounded, and how the Semper Fi Fund has helped them make that transition back to recovery. Unfortunately, Bethesda and Walter Reed are full again. More and more men and women are coming back from the war injured, sometimes awfully so. We need the Semper Fi Fund to be there for these Marines and those soldiers, sailors, and airmen who served alongside of them. Please consider a gift to the Semper Fi Fund. Very low overhead, extraordinary capacity to get money where it needs to get in a hurry, and great management, including some of the senior Marines who've ever served under the flag. When you're looking for something to do that will make an impact, please check out the Semper Fi Fund. That's www.semperfifund.org, www.semperfifund.org.
Hi, Bob O'Brien of Certified Products in Chicago. You're listening to Fully Threaded Radio, the largest proponent of free beer in the fastener industry.
Brian and Eric, polar bear-loving Fastener Talk Radio hosts, back with you from the online Fastener Party Bungalow.
I didn't know you liked polar bears that much.
Well, after the last episode, we have to emphasize our strengths, you know.
Okay. I mean, you paid a visit to the Brookfield Zoo.
Well, we took a little bit of flack is all.
Right.
We don't need to get into that right now. There'll be a time and a place for that. And there's plenty of flack flying right now, and I'm glad Rob Lucas was able to join us and put a little perspective on that. There's quite a bit going on right now, but the fact is there's a lot that we just don't know, and it's probably smart to reserve judgment on some of this stuff.
Yeah, that's true, actually. You know, I worked for many years for one of the big Fortune 50 companies, and we bought and sold many companies, and there was always a confusion. But the guiding knowledge really was the saying, those who know don't say, and those who say don't know.
Yeah, that's sage advice, you know, wisdom from the ages comes in handy in times like this.
Yeah, there's nothing new, okay?
But the point is, there's probably going to be some pretty big fallout from this as it goes. And, you know, I wanted to point out also that we did extend the invitation to several different people to comment on this issue. And, you know, they withheld comment. And hopefully we'll be able to attract some of these people for future episodes, because this isn't going away and there's going to be a lot of commentary to be made going forward.
Well, I think it could have been a bit premature for some of the people to be making public commentaries anyway. Even though they may want to, it wouldn't be wise for them to do that. But hopefully we can catch up with them, you know, when things become a little bit more clear.
Right, absolutely. And the NFDA contingent will probably have an update for us when they return, and it sounds so far like they're making some good progress. It sounds like a successful trade mission out to Stuttgart.
Well, it'll be interesting to talk to Tom when he comes back. I mean, he's been to Germany before, and Stuttgart's a sort of a really interesting city actually, because it's, you know, it's right in the heart of the what I would have called the heavy food section of Germany. Good hearty meals. That's, you know, just north of the Black Forest. So, but it's the place where some of the world's greatest cars, the Porsches, are built. So everyone who lives in that area gets used to seeing these things driving around some of these twisty roads they have all around that area. Really pretty part of Germany, actually.
Yeah, you know, it's gotten to the point where I don't even ask you anymore if you've been to any of these cities. I just take it for granted. You've been everywhere.
I lived for 6 years in Germany.
So like you and Rob Lucas, between you two guys, you pretty much have the world covered.
No, he travels a lot more than I have. I was sent to stay in places, but Rob travels.
Well, we'll give another shout-out and thanks to Rob Lucas for joining us today. It was good of him to give us his perspectives on the whole heads and threads situation, and our other guests, Tom Buddenbohn of Technology Components Southwest, Holden Lewis of BB&T Capital Markets, and, of course, Mike McNulty with Fastener Technology International. Thanks to all of you.
Yes, thanks.
Also, a big thank you to all of our listeners. We sure do appreciate it. We sure do appreciate the feedback and the many comments that you're sending our way. We are listening.
Right. Be you in the United States or China, as we know. We have listeners even.
Right. And by the way, we can't really do that much with the multi-byte character set emails. You know, they come in. I just don't know what it is. It's a bunch of gobbledygook, but I'm sure it's well-meaning, you know. You know, on the other hand, maybe we're getting some flames from China. Maybe they're mad at us. Who knows?
Yeah. Actually, the move to a full character set is one of the things we're actually testing in our source finder emails, of all things.
Oh, man, I'm glad you're on the team because I never would have thought of that. But I suppose that's where we need to be going, and that's what we're going to do. And if you're not yet a subscriber to Fully Threaded Radio and you use an iPod or you have an iPhone, you can go out to iTunes and sign up, and that way you will never miss an episode. Also, if you're a BlackBerry user, you can subscribe as well. So we appreciate it if you do that, and we've made it pretty easy.
And you can also just go to Fully Threaded and click on the arrow and listen to it online.
Well, they probably know that, though, Bri, because they're listening right now, so...
Oh, okay, right. Right, so wipe that out.
And as we said earlier, please do communicate with us and take note of what we're putting up there on the Facebook page for Fully Threaded. We hope to make that a little bit more of a going concern and a place for some two-way communication. And good old-fashioned email is always an option as well. And the address is ftr@fullythreaded.com. I had somebody ask me to fax some information over to him the other day, you know.
Oh, my God. Okay. We actually originally had fax numbers stored in FCH when we first set it up, remember? And then a couple of years ago we took it off. It seemed, well, some people do use it, but...
It's okay. You know, I gave him the number for BAI Publishing and, you know, went on to the next call.
Right. Yeah, it's good. It's like standing by, cranking down the presses.
And, you know, speaking of the old days, we didn't mention, we kicked off today's show with a little YouTube clip from a video called What is the Internet Anyway? And that was from 1994. The part of it that we listened to was Katie Couric and Bryant Gumbel asking their producer, well, what is this Internet thing? And now here's a couple of people who are fairly well informed. And back in 1994, it was still a new thing, and we've come such a long way.
Yes, that's true, actually. Well, you would remember that in, was it 1994 or something? It could be 93. I was giving a presentation to a group of people in a Chicago company about the Internet because the first browser had just been released. It ran only on a Macintosh, and you could get to like 5 websites, 6 websites, and the people were completely unimpressed. I couldn't see what the point of or what the use of this Internet was.
Right.
I was devastated.
And the technology has come so far. Since the last episode, a major landmark moment in computing history took place, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it. We do have something about this on our Facebook page, and the computer from IBM, known as Watson, beat 2 of the famous all-time champs on the game show Jeopardy.
Yes, that's true, actually. And you know, this whole project to build this computer came out of a dinner meeting that one of the IBM vice presidents was having with his friends, and they all asked if they could cut the dinner short because they wanted to get home and watch Jeopardy. So he decided to watch it, and he thought, we could do this. We could make a computer to do this. Little knowing that it would take 4 years and a great deal of money and some very, very, very smart people. And they achieved it. And actually the computer Watson is able to actually weigh up groups of answers similar to the way they think the human brain does. It sort of gets a whole lot of answers and it works out what's really the most likely. And as a byproduct, it can also understand a human language. You know, because remember, the Jeopardy questions are not like straight questions. They have little jokes in the questions as well. So this is a pretty important thing. I mean, a lot of people have been working for, say, 20 years at trying to build a machine that can really work a little bit like a human brain, a little bit. This is the closest so far.
Well, they're certainly on their way.
Right, and you know that from the last episode as well, you noted that the real thing was that Ray Kurzweil had predicted that by 2045 humans will build a computer capable of replicating and storing the human mind.
Right, the so-called singularity.
Right. Well, actually, this Watson is a fair way towards that. I mean, considering we've still got another 34 years, okay?
Well, it's a milestone, that's for sure. But, you know, what I really want to know is when these robots finally do overtake human beings and they're the dominant form on the planet, will we still have Facebook?
Well, no. It depends which type of a robot you're thinking of. If it's a Dalek, you won't have a face. Well, you wouldn't need one.
I don't ever remember Kurzweil talking about Daleks, and I don't think we even want to get into that whole thing right now, you know?
No, he didn't. He would have been probably dealing a little bit more with Isaac Asimov's robots, I think.
Oh, my God. Now we're into a melange of sci-fi, twisted reality, and I don't know where this is all going. It's kind of like the news headlines of today, you know? Bringing it all back. This is just too much for me to bear, and we might have gone a little bit off the tracks at the end of episode 20. What do you think we should do about it?
Well, I think we should wrap this episode up.
Great minds, right?
Okay. Yeah, see you later, everybody.
For Brian Musker, this is Eric Dudas. Thanks for listening once again, everyone, and we'll talk to you next time.
Fully Threaded Radio is a production of Fasteners Clearinghouse. Music provided by Audionautics.
I can't think of anything else to say at the moment, okay?